Welcome, brave soul, I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. Not every promise is meant to be kept. Some are simply just a trap. And when a grieving heart longs too desperately, someone, is always listening. Our story today begins in the quiet town of Ashwick, a place where time itself seemed to slow, where streets were lined with barren oaks and winters lasted far too long. It is here that Helen Marlowe lived, a woman hollowed out by grief, her home echoing with silence ever since the death of her only daughter, Emily. Helen was not the same woman she had been before the accident. Once vibrant, laughing, singing in the kitchen with her child, she had become a shadow of herself, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red from nights of endless crying. And it was on such a night so still that the ticking of the old grandfather clock sounded like hammer blows, that the package arrived. No return address. Just brown paper, twine tied delicate with ribbon, and beneath it, a card with letters so ornate they seemed to belong to another century. A mother should never lose her child. I can give her back to you. This is my promise. Helen's hands trembled as she opened it, heart galloping inside her chest. And when she peeled away the paper, she gasped so sharply it seemed to slice her lungs. It was a doll. But not just any doll. Its likeness was a perfect match. It looked Emily. The same soft auburn curls, the same small gap between her front teeth, the tiny birthmark beneath her left eye. The longer Helen stared, the more she swore she could see her daughter's warmth in its porcelain face. She did not scream. She did not recoil. She clutched the doll to her chest, collapsing to the floor, whispering thank you, thank you, thank you until her voice gave way to sobs. For the first time in weeks, she slept soundly. But peace never lasts long, especially when it has been bought by a promise. The sound woke her. Helen sat up, sweat dampening her nightgown. A noise, faint but rhythmic, drifted down the hallway. A creaking sound, and it sounded like it was heading to the nursery. Her skin prickled. She hadn't stepped inside since the funeral. But the sound drew her, compelled her, until she stood frozen in the doorway. The rocking chair moved gently back and forth, though no wind stirred the curtains. And in it, the doll. Its head was tilted toward the door, toward her, as if it had been waiting. Its glass eyes gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Helen swallowed, forcing a laugh. I must have put it there. But she hadn't. She remembered leaving it on the dresser. She found the doll in her bed. Its porcelain cheek rested against her shoulder, cold and rigid. Her scream ripped through the darkness. She seized it and hurled it into the nursery, locking the door behind her. And that night she heard it, Mommy. A whisper. Thin, high-pitched, the sound of a child through a closed door. Mommy, I'm so cold. Her stomach dropped to ice. The next day she bought a security camera. Logic, she told herself. Proof that grief hadn't made her mad. Proof that nothing was moving the doll but her imagination. But when morning came, when she sat in her kitchen with trembling hands around a mug of cold coffee and pressed play, she watched the doll lift its head at 2:14 a.m. She watched its eyes blink, not glass but wet, human, reflecting the faint glow of the nursery nightlight. She watched it crawl, stiff but determined, across the nursery floor at 2:23. She watched it stop in her bedroom doorway at 2:46, tilting its head as though listening to her breathe. And she watched, helpless, as at 3:07, it climbed onto her bed and turned its face directly toward the camera. Its eyes were not doll's eyes at all. They were Emily's. Helen slammed the laptop shut, her breath ragged, while burning her throat. And that was when the letters began. Slipped under her door, no stamp, no address. She is restless. You must finish the promise. Say yes and she will stay forever. That night, Helen dreamed of her daughter. She dreamed of Emily's laugh, the soft warmth of her hair, the way she used to climb into bed and snuggle under her arm. When she woke, tears streaked her face. And the doll's porcelain hand rested gently on hers. It was only then that she began to see him. At first, a shadow in the corner of her vision. A tall figure with shoulders hunched unnaturally, hands long and pale, his face hidden. Then closer. A silhouette at the end of the street as she closed her curtains. A reflection in the glass of the television screen. It was the Dollmaker, just watching and waiting. Helen felt his promise tightening around her like invisible string. And so one night, desperate, broken, consumed by grief and madness, she whispered into the silence. Yes, please let her stay. I want her to stay. The nursery door swung open. Standing there, barefoot, trembling, was Emily. Not porcelain. not glass, flesh and blood. Her Emily was alive. Helen collapsed to her knees, sobbing, pulling her into her arms. "You're home. Oh my God, you're home." She didn't see the figure in the shadows behind her. The Dollmaker. His eyes glinting like pins. His mouth stitched into a crooked smile. The promise had been kept. But promises, after all, always demand a price. At first it was bliss. Emily was back. Her little footsteps pattered across the floorboards. Her laughter filled the hollow spaces of the house. Helen could hardly believe it, drinking in every second like a starving woman feasting on scraps. They baked cookies together, Emily's favorite, with too many chocolate chips. They sat in the garden, the child humming tuneless songs while Helen brushed her hair. For 3 days Helen lived inside a miracle. But on the 4th day, something shifted. Helen noticed it first at breakfast. Emily sat at the table, swinging her legs. Her eyes were bright, her smile wide. But when Helen poured her orange juice, Emily didn't drink. She just watched. Hours passed. The glass remained untouched. That night, when Helen tucked her in, she leaned down to kiss her forehead. Emily smiled up at her. But her skin was cool, too cool. Like porcelain left in the shade. On the 5th night, Helen woke to a scratching sound. It came from the walls. At first she thought rats. But when she pressed her ear to the plaster, her blood froze. It wasn't rats. It was a whisper, dragging nails along the wood, a child's voice murmuring faintly inside the walls. "Mommy? I'm still here. Mommy, it's dark." Helen staggered back, heart convulsing. Her eyes darted to the bed. Emily lay asleep, chest rising and falling slowly. But when the child turned her head, her eyes stayed open, watching. That was when Helen began to wonder. If this child was Emily, then who was whispering through the walls? The next morning, another letter arrived. This time, Helen found it lying on top of the rocking chair, though she swore she had locked the nursery. The paper was yellowed, brittle, the ink almost brown, as if written with rust. "You have accepted my promise. But you must feed it. Love is not enough. To keep her, you must give." No explanation. No instructions. Just those words. When Helen turned the note over, she found something smeared there. A fingerprint. It was small and delicate, stained with red. Helen's mind fractured into 2 voices. One begged her to stop, to burn the doll, to flee the house and never look back. The other whispered, "It's your daughter. And she's here and she's real. Would you dare risk losing her again?" And so Helen clung tighter. She dressed Emily. She brushed her hair. She ignored the way the girl's eyes sometimes seemed wrong, too sharp, too knowing. She ignored the faint stench that sometimes followed her, sweet and rotting all at once. By the 7th day, Helen's desperation for answers drove her back to the security camera. She hadn't checked it since the night of the blinking eyes. But she needed to know, needed to be sure. She pressed play. The footage showed Emily asleep in bed, small and peaceful. Then at 2:31 a.m. her body twitched. Not the twitch of dreams. Something more violent, more grotesque. Her limbs jerked at unnatural angles, joints bending too far. Then slowly she rose. But the way she stood, it wasn't like a child rising from sleep. It was more like a puppet tugged by invisible strings. She lurched to the corner of the room and stood there, facing the wall, her head turning by degrees until her neck creaked. And then, she looked straight into the camera. Her eyes were not Emily's. They were black and bottomless. The screen flickered. Static drowned the sound. When it returned, Helen could only watch in horror as Emily leaned close to the lens, her lips splitting into a grin too wide for a child's face. And though there was no audio, Helen heard it, clear as if whispered into her ear. "She's not me. I'm still inside the walls." Helen slammed the laptop shut. Her hands shook. Her breath came in ragged bursts. What had she invited back into her home? The next day, Mrs. Cunningham from next door stopped by. An elderly woman, sharp-eyed but nosy, but kind at heart. "I thought I heard a child laughing," she said, peering around Helen into the hallway. "Helen, dear, you know Emily's gone, don't you?" Helen's lips trembled. "She's here. She's back. Don't you see?" And before she could stop herself, she called Emily to the door. The little girl appeared, barefoot, smiling shyly. Mrs. Cunningham's face blanched. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and for a moment she seemed to choke on her words. "Helen," she whispered, voice breaking, "that is not your daughter." And then she stumbled back down the porch, crossing herself, muttering prayers under her breath. Helen stood in the doorway, trembling. Emily's hand slipped into hers. "Don't listen to her, Mommy," the child said sweetly. She's just jealous because she doesn't have me. But Helen could not shake the image of Mrs. Cunningham's face, that look of pure gut-deep terror. It was not the look of someone who saw a child. It was the look of someone who saw a ghost, or something far, far worse. On the 10th night, Helen woke to the sound of humming, soft and tuneless, Emily's hum. But when she turned her head, the bed was empty. The humming came from the bathroom. She rose, her feet icy against the floor, and crept toward the sound. The door was ajar. Inside, Emily stood before the mirror, humming, her head cocked. Her reflection cocked the opposite way. Helen's stomach twisted. Emily lifted her hand. The reflection did not move. Instead, the reflection smiled. And when it opened its mouth, the voice that spilled out was not Emily's. It was the Dollmaker's. You've kept your promise, Helen. But do you see now? What you hold is not a gift. It is a vessel. Helen staggered back, slamming the door. Her screams echoed through the house, but the humming never stopped. The Dollmaker's promise was unraveling, and Helen was trapped. The house was no longer a home. It was a tomb. Each night the walls whispered. Each night the scratching grew louder. Sometimes it was tiny fingernails, sometimes claws, and always that voice. Mommy, please, let me out. But Emily, her Emily, was already there. Smiling, laughing, tugging at her sleeve, asking to be tucked in. Two Emilys. One in the walls, one in the bed, and Helen was breaking. On the 11th night, another note appeared. This one was pinned to the nursery door with a long, rusted needle. The paper smelled faintly of ash. The promise is nearly complete, but the vessel is hungry. You must feed her, or she will take. Helen dropped the letter, her breath shallow, her heart hammering. What do you mean by feed her? Feed her what? The answer came sooner than she feared. It was late, past midnight, when she heard the knock. Weak and trembling, she opened the door to find Mrs. Cunningham again. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale. Helen, please. I heard her again. I can't sleep. I need to see. Helen hesitated. Emily stood behind her in the hall, eyes wide, lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Let her in, Mommy. The voice was soft, much too soft, like a whisper wrapped in honey. And before Helen knew it, she had stepped aside. Mrs. Cunningham entered, clutching her cross. She turned to Helen, tears brimming. You must let her go, she begged. That's not your daughter. It's something else, something wearing her. She never finished, because Emily lunged. Her small hands were no longer soft, no longer childlike. They were stiff, sharp, fingers clicking like porcelain joints. And when they tore into Mrs. Cunningham's throat, the old woman's scream was muffled beneath a wet gurgle. Helen froze. She could not move, could not breathe. By the time her senses returned, Mrs. Cunningham was slumped on the carpet, her eyes glassy, her face twisted in terror. And Emily licked her lips. See, Mommy, she whispered. I told you I was hungry. Helen vomited on the floor. She begged. She pleaded. No more. Please, no more. But the Dollmaker's promise could not be undone. Helen tried to hide the body. She dragged it into the nursery, the stench of copper thick in her throat, her muscles trembling with effort. She laid Mrs. Cunningham's corpse in the rocking chair, draping a blanket across her shoulders as though she slept. But when Helen turned to leave, the chair began to move, back and forth, and the corpse's head tilted. Its eyes locked onto Helen's, and the mouth moved. She's not your child. She never was. Run, Helen. Run. Helen screamed, slamming the door. When she dared look again, the chair was empty. The body was gone. From that night on, Helen no longer slept. Every corner seemed to hold shadows that shifted when she blinked. Every reflection, mirrors, windows, even the kettle, showed Emily standing closer than she should be. And the whispers grew clearer. Mommy, please, don't love her, she is not me. Love me instead, I'm still here. I'm still here. Sometimes Helen clawed at the walls, desperate to free the voice inside. Her nails broke. Her fingers bled. Emily would just watch, smiling. Stop that, Mommy. You'll hurt yourself. And I don't want to lose you again. Her tone was gentle and loving. And yet her eyes were empty. It came to a head on the 13th night. Helen stood in the nursery, rocking in the chair, Emily in her lap. The Dollmaker's shadow loomed in the corner, stitches glinting in the half-light. The child nestled against her chest. You'll never let me go again, right, Mommy? Helen's lips quivered. You're my daughter. My only daughter. The Dollmaker stepped forward, his movements jerky as though his bones had been carved of wood. His voice rasped, needle-thin. The promise is sealed. and suddenly the wall split open. Dozens of tiny porcelain white hands reached out, clawing at the plaster, writhing desperate. Faces emerged, half-formed, broken dolls, each with wide, empty eyes. They wailed in unison. "Mommy, let us out, please, Mommy. Mommy, please." Helen shrieked, covering her ears. Emily clutched her tighter, her smile stretching too wide. "Don't listen to them, Mommy. I'm the only one who matters. Just me." But Helen's heart shattered. She looked into the face of the child she loved, the child she lost, and whispered, "You're not her." The dollmaker's stitched smile snapped open into a scream, his voice like tearing fabric. "You break the promise? Then you take her place." Helen's body convulsed as invisible threads wrapped around her wrists, her ankles, her throat. She was yanked upright, her limbs bending like marionette strings. She fought. She clawed. But the threads pulled tighter, sinking into her flesh, sewing her into stillness. Her screams faded to whimpers. And then, to silence. The neighbors grew concerned when Helen was not seen for days. When police entered the Marlowe home, they found the nursery door shut. The rocking chair creaked slowly back and forth. In it sat Helen, her face pale, frozen in a twisted smile. Her eyes were glass. And in her arms she cradled the doll. Not Emily, just porcelain. Its tiny mouth was painted into a grin. And if you listen closely late at night when the wind carries through Ashwick, you can still hear the nursery rocking chair. You can still hear the scratching in the walls. And sometimes if you stand very, very still, you'll hear a voice. "Mommy, please let me out." Not every promise is meant to be kept, especially the dollmakers. Let us know in the comments, would you have taken in the doll in the first place if it looked like your deceased child?
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.